When it got hot in the valley, Thomas and Alfred drove their cows up to a cool, green pasture in the mountain to graze. Usually they stayed there with the cows for 2 months. Then they brought them down to the valley again. The work was easy enough, but it was boring. All day the two men tended their cows. At night they went back to the tiny hut where they lived. They ate supper and worked in the garden and went to sleep. It was always the same. Then Thomas had an idea that changed everything. "Let's make a doll the size of man," he said. "It would be fun to make, and we could put it in the garden to scare away the birds." "It should look like Harold," Alfred said. Harold was a farmer they both hated. They made the doll out of an old sack stuffed with straw. They gave it a pointy nose like Harold's and tiny eyes like his. Then they added dark hair and twisted frown. Of course, they also gave Harold's name. Each morning on the way to the pasture, they tied Harold to the pole in the garden to scare away the bird. Each night, they brought him inside so that he wouldn't get ruined if it rained. When they were feeling playful, they would talk to him. One of them might say, "How are the vegetables growing today, Harold?" Then the other, making believe he was Harold, would answer in a crazy voice, "Very slowly." They both would laugh, but not Harold. Whenever something went wrong, they took it out on Harold. They would curse at him, even kick him or punch him. Sometimes one of them would take the food they were eating, which they both were sick of, and smear it on the doll's face. "How'd you like that stew, Harold?" He would ask. "Well, you better eat it, or else." Then the two men would howl with laughter. One night, after Thomas had wiped Harold's face with food, Harold grunted. "Did you hear that?" Alfred asked. "It was Harold," Thomas said. "I was watching him when it happened. I can't believe it." "How could he grunt?" Alfred asked. "He's just a sack of straw. It's not possible." "Let's throw him in the fire," said Thomas, "and that will be that." "Let's not do anything stupid," said Alfred. "We don't know what's going on. When we move the cow down, we'll leave him behind. For now, let's just keep an eye on him." So they left Harold sitting in the corner of the hut. They didn't talk to him or take him outside anymore. Now and then the doll grunted, but that was all. After a few days, they decided there was nothing to be afraid of. Maybe a mouse or some insect had gotten inside Harold and were making those sounds. So Thomas and Alfred went back to their old ways. Each morning they put Harold out in the garden, and each night they brought him back into the hut. When they felt playful, they joked with him. When they felt mean, they treated him as badly as ever. Then one night, Alfred noticed something that frightened him. "Harold is growing," he said. "I was thinking the same thing," Thomas said. "Maybe it's just our imagination," Alfred replied. "We have been up here on the mountain too long." The next morning, while they were eating, Harold stood up and walked out of the hut. He climbed up the roof and trotted back and forth like a horse on its hind leg. All day and all night long he trotted like that. In the morning, Harold climbed down and stood in the far corner of the pasture. The men had no idea what he would do next. They were afraid. They decided to take the cows down in the valley that same day. When they left, Harold was nowhere in sight. They felt as if they had escaped a great danger and began joking and singing. But when they had gone only a mile or two, they realized they had forgotten to bring the milking stool. Neither one wanted to go back for them, but the stool would cost a lot to replace. "There really is nothing to be afraid of," they told one another. After all, what could a doll do? They drew straws to see which one go back. It was Thomas. "I'll catch up with you," he said, and Alfred walked on towards the valley. When Alfred came to a rise in the path, he looked back for Thomas. He did not see him anywhere, but he did see Harold. The doll was on the roof of the hut again. As Alfred watched, Harold kneeled and stretched out a bloody skin to dry in the sun. The Dead Hen. The village huddled on the edge of the vast swamp. As vast as one could see, there were soggy meadows, holes filled with black water, and glistening sheets of wet, spongy peat, skeleton of giant trees, snake, the people called them, rose up out of the muck, their dead branches reaching out like long, twisted arms. During the day, the men in the village cut the peat and hauled it home to dry and sell for fuel. But when the sun went down and the winds sighing and moaning coming from the sea, the men were quick to leave. Strange creatures took over the swamp at night, and some even came into the village. That's what everyone said. People were so afraid they would not go out alone after dark. Young Tom Pattinson was the only person in the village who did not believe in this creature. On his way home from work, he would whisper to his friend, "There's one!" And they would jump and run, and Tom would laugh and laugh. Finally, some of his friends turned on him. "If you know so much," they said, "go back into the swamp some night and see what comes of it." "I'll do it," said Tom. "I work out there every day. Not once have I ever seen anything to frighten me. Why should it be different at night? Tomorrow night I'll take my lantern and walk out to the willow snake. If I get scared and run, I will never make fun of you again." The next night, the men went to Tom Pattinson's house to see him on his way. Thick clouds covered the moon. It was the blackest of nights. When they arrived, Tom's mother was pleading with him not to go. "I'll be all right," he said. "There's nothing to be afraid of. Don't be foolish like the rest." He took his lantern and, singing to himself, headed down the spongy path towards the willow snake. Some of the young men wondered if Tom wasn't right. Maybe they were afraid of things that did not exist. A few decided to follow him and see for themselves, but they stayed far behind in case he ran into trouble. They were sure they saw dark shape moving about, but Tom's lantern kept bobbing up and down. And Tom's song kept floating back to them, and nothing happened. Finally, they caught sight of the willow snake. There was Tom standing in the circle of light, looking this way and that. All of a sudden, the wind blew out his lantern, and Tom stopped singing. The man stood stock still in the blackness, waiting for something awful to happen. The clouds shifted and the moon came out. There was Tom again, only now he had his back pushed up against the willow snake, and he had his arm out in front of him, as if he were fighting something off. From where the man stood, it looked like dark shapes were swirling in around him. Then the clouds covered the moon again. Once more it was as black as pitch. When the moon came out again, Tom was hanging on the willow snake with one arm. His other arm was stretched out in front of him, as if something was pulling it. It looked to the man if a rotting, moldy hand with no arm, a dead hand, has grabbed Tom's hand. With one final wrench, whatever had hold of Tom jerked him into the muck. That's what the man said. When the clouds blotted out the moon once more, the men turned and ran through the blackness toward the village. Again and again they lost the path and fell into the muck and water holes. In the end, they crawled back on their hands and knees, but Tom Pattinson was not with them. In the morning, the people searched everywhere for Tom. Finally, they gave him up for lost. A few weeks later, towards evening, the villagers heard a cry. It was Tom's mother. She was rushing down the path from the swamp, shouting and waving. When she was sure the villagers had spotted her, she turned and ran back. Off they went after her. They found young Tom Pattinson by the willow snake, groaning and gibbering as if he had lost his mind. He kept pointing with one hand at something only he could see, where his other hand should have been. There was nothing but a rage, stump, oozing blood. The hand had been ripped clean off. Everybody said it was the dead hand that had done it, but nobody really knows. Nobody will ever know except Tom Pattinson, and he never spoke another word again. Such things happen. When Bill Nelson's cow stopped giving milk, he called the vet. "There's nothing wrong with that cow," the vet said. "She's just stubborn. That or some witch got hold of her." Bill and the vet both laughed. "That old hag, Eddie Fitch, I guess is the closest we got to a witch around here," the vet said. "But witches have gone out of style, haven't they?" Bill had run in with Eddie Fitch the month before. Bill had a run-in with Eddie Fitch the month before. He had hit her cat with his car and killed it. "I am really sorry, Eddie Fitch," he told her. "I will get you a new cat, just as pretty, just as good." Her eyes filled with hate. "I raised that cat from a kitten," she hissed. "I loved her. You'll be sorry for this, Bill Nelson." Bill sent her a new cat and heard nothing more. Then his cow stopped giving milk. Next, his old truck broke down. After that, his wife fell and broke her arm. Maybe it's Eddie Fitch getting even. And then, "Hey, you don't believe in witches. You're just upset." But Bill's grandpa believed in witches. He had once told Bill that there was only one sure way to stop a witch from causing trouble. "You find a black walnut tree," he said, "and you draw her picture on it. Then you mark an X where her heart is, and you drive a nail into the X. Every day you drive it in a little deeper. If she's causing the trouble," he said, "she'll feel pain. When she can't stand it anymore, she will come to you or send somebody and try to borrow something. If you give her what she wants, that breaks the power of the nail, and she will go on tormenting you. But if you don't, she will have to stop, or the pain will kill her." That's what his nice, gentle old grandpa believed. It's pure craziness, Bill thought. Of course, his grandpa didn't have so much schooling. Bill had been to college. He knew better. Then Bill's dog Joe, a perfectly healthy dog, dropped dead just like that. It made Bill angry. Despite all his schooling, he thought, maybe it is Eddie Fitch after all. He got a red crayon from his son's room and a hammer and a nail and went into the woods. He found a black walnut tree and drew a picture of Eddie Fitch on it. He made an X where her heart was, like his grandpa had said to do. With the hammer, he drove the nail a little way into the X. Then he went home. "I feel like a fool," he told his wife. "You should," she said. The next day, a boy named Timmy Logan came by. "Eddie Fitch isn't feeling well," he said. "She wonders if she could borrow some sugar from you." Bill Nelson stared at Timmy in amazement. He took a deep breath. "Tell her I am sorry, but I don't have any sugar right now," he said. When Timmy Logan left, Bill went back to the walnut tree and drove the nail in another inch. The next day, the boy came back. "Eddie Fitch is pretty sick," he said. "She's wondering if you got any sugar yet." "Tell her I am sorry," Bill Nelson said, "but I still don't have any." Bill went into the woods and drove the nail in another inch. The following day, the boy was back. "Eddie Fitch is getting sicker," he said. "She really needs some sugar." "Tell her I still don't have any," Bill answered. Bill's wife was angry. "You've got to stop this," she said. "If this mumbo-jumbo works, it's like a murder." "I will stop when she does," he asked. Towards dusk, he stood in the yard staring at the ridge where the old lady lived, wondering what's going on up there. Then, in the half-darkness, he saw Eddie Fitch coming slowly down the hill toward him. With her pinched, bony face and her old black coat, she did look like a witch. As he got closer, Bill saw that she could barely walk. "Maybe I'm really hurting her," he thought. He ran to get his hammer to pull the nail out, but before he could leave, Eddie Fitch was in the yard, her face twisted with rage. "First you killed my cat," she said, "then you wouldn't give me a bit of sugar when I need it." She swore at him and fell dead at his feet. "I'm not surprised that she dropped dead that way," the doctor said later. She was very old, maybe 90. It was her heart, of course. "Some people thought she was a witch," Bill said. "I've heard that," the doctor said. "Somebody I know thought Eddie Fitch had witched him." Bill went on. He drew a picture of her on a tree, then drove a nail into it to make her stop. "That's an old superstition," the doctor said. "But people like us don't believe it that sort of thing, do we?" The Wolf Girl. Travel northwest into the desert from Del Rio, Texas, and eventually you will come to Devil's River. In the 1830s, a trapper named John Dan and his wife Molly settled where Dry Creek runs into Devil's River. Dan was after beaver, which were plentiful there. He and Molly built a cabin from brush, and near it they put up an arbor to give them shade. Molly then became pregnant. When she was ready to have their child, John then raced on horseback to their nearest neighbor, several miles away. "My wife is having a baby," he said to the man and his wife. "Can you help us?" They agreed to come at once. As they got ready to leave, a violent storm came up and a bolt of lightning struck and killed John Dan. The man and his wife managed to find his cabin, but did not arrive until the next day. By then, Molly Dan was dead too. It looked as if she had given birth before she died, but the neighbor could not find the baby. Since there was wolf tracks all around, they decided the wolf had eaten it. They buried Molly Dan and left. A number of years after she died, people began to tell a strange tale. Some swore it was a true story. Others said it would never could have happened. This story began in a small settlement a dozen miles from Molly's Dan grave. Early one morning, a pack of wolves raced in from the desert and killed some goats. Such attacks were not unusual in those days, but a boy thought he saw a naked young girl with long blonde hair running with the wolves. A year or two later, a woman came up upon some wolf eating a goat that had just killed. Eating the goat with them, she claimed, was a naked young girl with long blonde hair. When the wolf and the girl saw her, they fled. The woman said that at first the girl ran on all fours. Then she stood and ran like a human, swiftly as the wolves. People started wondering if this wolf girl was Molly Dan's daughter. Had a mother wolf carried her off the day she was born and raised her with her pups? If so, by now she will be 10 or 11 years old. As the story is told, some men began to look for the girl. They searched along the river bank and in the desert and its canyon. And one day it says they found her walking in the canyon with a wolf at her side. When the wolf ran off, the girl hid in an opening in one of the canyon walls. When the men tried to capture her, she fought back, beating and scratching like an enraged animal. When they finally subdued her, she began screaming like a frightened young girl and howling like a frightened young wolf. Her captors bound her with a rope, put her across a horse, and took her to a small ranch house in the desert. They would turn her over to the sheriff the next day. They decided. They placed her in an empty room and untied her, terror-stricken. She hid in the shadow. They left her and locked the door. Soon she was screaming and howling again. The men thought they would go mad listening to her, but at last she stopped. When the night fell, wolf began howling in the distance. People say that each time they stopped, the girl howled in reply. As the story goes, the cries of wolf came from every direction and got closer and closer. Suddenly, as if a signal had been given, wolf attacked the horse and other livestock. The men rushed into the darkness, firing their guns. High up in the wall, in the room where they had left the girl, was a small window. A plank was nailed across it. She pulled the plank off, crawled through the window, and disappeared. Years passed with no word of the girl. Then one day, some men on horseback came around a bend in the Rio Grande, not far from the Devil's River. They claimed they saw a young woman with long blonde hair feeding two wolves' pups. When she saw the men, she snatched up the pups and ran into the brush. They rode after her, but she quickly left them behind. They searched and searched, but found no trace of her. That is the last we know of the wolf girl, and it's there, in the desert, near the Rio Grande, that this story ends.